military-style ICE raid. It's part of a broader Trump playbook to clearly stoke division over immigration from certain countries and race. His tactics have raised new questions tonight about equality, dignity in law enforcement, and human rights writ large, including how this resistance this time will respond. With some of that in mind, we want to broaden out right now. We're joined by a voice that many have come to rely on for exactly these type of questions. Ta-Nehisi is a renowned author. He's a veteran of The Atlantic. We're here today marking the 10th anniversary of what became a breakthrough memoir, Between the World and Me. It was released in 2015, hailed by figures like Barack Obama and Toni Morrison, celebrated around the world, translated in over a dozen languages, earning the National Book Award, later adapted into an HBO documentary.
To be black in the Baltimore of my youth was to be naked before the elements, before all the guns, fists, knives, crack, rape, and disease. The nakedness is not an error. The nakedness is the intended result of policy. The system makes your body breakable.
The man behind those words and some of that life that you shared, Ta-Nehisi, the acclaimed author, comic book writer, and public intellectual, is here. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, John.
The question I want to ask you about the immigration wars. Do you think this is something that, with everything the Black Americans have to already deal with, this is something the Black Americans should also see as part of their struggle, or do you see it as a divide and conquer thing?
I don't even think they should see it as part. I think it is. It just is. Because there is no vision of black liberation in this country that is true, that is durable, that is sustainable, that allows for the degradation and the oppression of other people. I think the best of the black struggle is MLK doing everything, he's done and speaking in this big, expansive way, about the liberation of his people and how that, meant all people. And then at the height of his powers, looking over to Vietnam and saying, I will put on the line all of my credibility, everything I have, because there is no way that my ethic of nonviolence and freedom makes sense if I allow myself to be integrated into the system that is right now destroying these people half a world away. I think that's us at our best and at our most courageous. And so I don't see a vision of a black struggle that looks at folks being snatched, in front of a Home Depot where they're, looking for work, where people are worried about whether they're gonna be able to see their kids, graduate. And it's like, you know what, I need some rest right now, I'm not dealing with that. I don't think that's true to the tradition, I don't think that's true to the history or the best of the culture.
The book's turning 10.
Yes.
You're turning 50.
Yes.
What's on your mind?
Well, I'm getting old.
Yeah.
We're not getting any younger, man. No, we're not getting any younger. I'm sort of stunned, because I've said this before for books. People are introduced to them at their finished moment. But for those of us who write them, you get with this kind of notion in your head and then you try to scribble it out. And so when I see Between the World and Me, I see all of my fears and my anxieties, like starting it and for most of the period of making it, thinking it really wasn't actually a book. That actually I was just kind of,
it was like your notebook?
I mean, I intended it for it to be a book.
Yeah.
But I rewrote Between the World and Me, 3-4 times, I think? Yeah, 3-4 different drafts. And I had a great editor, Chris Jackson, now at One World, was at Speaking the Growl before that, who was very very exacting on the book, and wanted it to land with the kind of impact. There's been all this sort of comparisons, I think, in the media with James Baldwin, but I have to be absolutely clear. He functioned for us as a kind of creative bar. And so I had this memory of reading The Fire Next Time when I was at Howard University, either my sophomore or junior, I can't remember, and reading it all the way through and sitting in the library and knowing how much of an impact that had on me. And that's what we were consciously trying to do. We wanted people to read it and feel, like their world had been shaken by something in the same way that, I had that memory of my world being shaken by a baller.
I want to look at that decade from when the book came out and it had this breakthrough reception to everything we've been through. And on our side here doing daily news, we hear a lot of the narrative, a lot of where the energy is, the mood, as they call it. And I notice it's often wrong, and in politics, deliberately so. The recent narrative around race in America at the political level is, well, things were overdone towards diversity, recruitment, DEI, civil rights. After George Floyd, there was an initial reaction about the fundamental killing, later adjudicated to be a murder, caught on video. But then it spread more widely into other reform. You referenced structural reform. And it was interesting because for a short time there were corporations going out of their way in public to say, hey, we're about this. They have completely backtracked on that. Many people skeptical at the time, but after the election we have these headlines. These are companies that have sometimes very left-leaning bases, and some of them, I should say, in their core have diversity. Google scrapped diversity hiring goals. Meta and Amazon scaled back. McDonald's retreats from DEI. McDonald's has a very diverse working base. There was a time where they thought saying DEI was good, I guess, for that reason. Walmart, a largest employer, rolls back what were DEI programs after this backlash. What does your work and the book tell you about that head fake or moment towards DEI and branding and now complete retreat?
These corporations have kind of moved off of where they were in 2020. I think they are part of a larger, unfortunate trend in the boardroom, in higher education, in our business, in journalism, of what I can only term as just rank cowardice. And I've been surprised by that. I guess I shouldn't have been, and that is my naivete.
You watch Democratic presidents, including Obama, plead and cajole and ask corporate America to try various things, and they often are ignored, whether that's healthcare cooperation or whatever. And here, in a short order, he's got everyone without a law passed backing off. How do you view that?
I just want to double down on this cowardice plan, and I'll tell you why. It is not simply the retreat from DEI. It is the fact that what you have is effectively an administration of television stars. People who are very good at commanding the camera and commanding attention, to themselves. It's a mix of, reality stars, trolls, etc. And so it is not simply that you have scuttled, these programs from the government, that you fired a lot of qualified and overly qualified, I would argue, Black, brown, LGBT women, etc. It is that you have installed people who are mediocre and inadequate. And there are people who have fashioned themselves as, part of the leadership of this country, once again, in the boardroom, in media, in universities, who are watching this and are going along with it. They can't fight it. Nobody is going to get out of this, unscarred. This is not, a situation in which Black folks or, minorities or whoever, are going to, pay. Everybody is going to pay for this. Everybody will pay for what RFK Jr. is doing. Everyone, public health will pay for it. And folks can't stand up. It's shocking. You know what I mean?
And do you think that's because so many people, those folks you're talking about, are in this somewhat or largely white-collar positioning where there's capitalism and there's jobs, and they don't want to do anything that really...
I guess the question I have now is, and I do mean this as a question, and perhaps, at some point I'll get to investigate. I'm not a product of a particularly competitive, university system. At least it was seen that way at the time. It's become competitive. I'm not the product of Ivy Leagues, you know what I mean? And so I guess what I'm increasingly wondering is, what were the values that were being inculcated in these places? Like, where does this come from? Where does this notion of just sort of saying democracy, but not really wanting to wage war on its behalf come from? Where does this, notion of talking about how great America is until it comes time for you to lose your job over it? I don't quite understand it.
I think it's an important critique. I suppose one aspect is that people who are the product of those elite institutions don't see a life for themselves. They don't want to be in a role where they're not attached to something really important and elite. And so that they'll do their thing within. They'll publish this book or be involved in that symposium, but they don't really want to do anything that risks that position. That's one part of it.
But they're not going to be attached to something elite anyway very soon. I mean, that's kind of like it's being degraded. That's what's happening.
Yeah. Ta-Nehisi, Coach, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Art. Much appreciated.
Powerful warnings, the full interview, MSNBC.com/ARI. We'll be right back.